Welcome, and this is another edition of Idea Special Feature. On this edition, we are so delighted to have Mazi Igwe. But before you meet him, we're going to short break. When we return, you'll be hearing more about him. Stay with us.
Having had that knowledge, having seen the importance there.
You were enough numbers.
We're just trying to use technology to make something that we are already aware of more efficient and go a little bit further to help us.
Or a plant, a particular plant of interest.
Welcome back from that short break. Well, if you're just joining us, this is Idea Special Feature, and today our special guest is no other than Mazi Igwe. He is a leading technology entrepreneur and innovator shaping Africa's fintech and cybersecurity landscape. He is also the CEO of Susumi's Capital, a blockchain-powered crowdfunding platform expanding financial access across markets or emerging markets. And he is also the co-founder of Abatis Technology, a cybersecurity company protecting enterprises and critical infrastructure. With over 3 decades of experience in blockchain, cybersecurity, and digital transformation, Mazi Igwe has also led pioneering ventures like Sahara Bells Communications and GOGSM.net. He is passionate about leveraging technology to solve real-world challenges. It's so good to have you on this edition of Idea Special Feature.
Thank you very much. It's my real honor to be in this place, and I love what you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. That makes me smile. Okay, so Mazi, you've been building tech companies for over 3 decades. Just tell us a bit about your journey so far. How's it been? How's the experience?
Well, I would say my journey has really been all about solving needs, using technology to solve need. Beginning in the mid-1990s, which is when I started, we were using developing satellite-based applications to solve remote communication problems here in Africa, and that was with Sahara Bells. And then we went on later on with GoGSM.net, which is when the GSM networks finally came on stream. And then at some point in the 2000s, I kind of jackpot, like they say. So I became a technology consultant in the UK for several years, about 15 years. And now I founded Susumi Capital, which is a decentralized finance application to help with financial inclusion. And then following on from that, I moved into cybersecurity, which we've just started last year here in Abuja, which is Abatis Technology. So it's been interesting.
Very interesting journey you've had, and I can just tell that you've had to face some challenges and some wins also. Yeah. But why blockchain for financial inclusion? What really convinced you to go into this?
Well, in a nutshell, we need systems where we can have access and build on trust, in the bureaucratic systems, in financial systems, and also giving people access. I think it's critical in a way that it's democratized, it's broad-based, for everybody to have. So one of the biggest problems I think we have has to do with access to capital. So blockchain is something that brings forward transparency. Blockchain gives security. And it's a technology that really it's able to, because of its decentralized nature, it's able to give more people access to do things without being clogged down by too much of the bureaucracy. So that's really where blockchain comes in very useful for us. So there's trust, there's transparency, and then there's access, decentralized access.
Okay, you're doing something really beautiful. We must commend it. But with Susumi Capital, you're doing a lot to make it very traditional, bring the community people. So how are you able to pull all of that?
Okay, so Susumi, if I tell you a little bit about Susumi itself, the name Susumi, is actually, it's a Japanese word, which means to make progress beautifully. But in our own case, we look at, like how we say brother me, sister me, which is my brother, my sister. So Susumi is basically my susu. And susu is something that everybody, it's a traditional age-old system.
Is it like Osusu?
It is a susu. So some places it's called a susu, some places it's called susu. You know, it has different names. Some places it's susu, but it's generally susu. So it's my susu, which we interpret as my wealth creating community. So it's something that people are already used to, but in this case now we are digitizing it, bringing it onto the blockchain, and we are working with communities, people who are already used to that aspect of holding each other's hands, you know, to rise up on the financial ladder. So it's something that is already traditional in the system. So we're not bringing something new. We're just trying to use technology to make something that we're already aware of more efficient and go a little bit further to help us.
Okay, so with a lot of fintech that we see today, the focus is usually, when they say community, the focus is mostly urban. So does Susumi have people in the rural communities in mind? How are they going to bring them on board with all of this development?
Okay, indeed, when you talk about communities, the core community really are the people who are the traditional communities. Of course, now we have online communities, and community, the definition of community has now become kind of spread out, because a guy on social media with a following is a community. Yeah. You know, you have the social communities, then you have the traditional and various other communities. But right. With Susumi, we are really looking at those who are at the bottom rung, you know, those who depend, who are not able to have access to traditional finance, okay, those who don't have access to institutional credit, you know. So here in Africa and most of the developing countries, things like overdrafts and credit cards and things like that don't reach a lot of people. But what they do know is that they have, you know, people who know them in the community. And the idea behind that is to work, we're already working with cooperatives, and then we want to work with, you know, the groups, maybe the social groups who reach those people directly, not the people who don't have this problem, but people who really need it so that they can have access to that kind of capital. The capital is there, it's already existing within those communities, but it's kind of fragmented. So basically the idea is that when communities need to get money, they look for external parties outside the community. Yeah. But within those communities, if there's a mechanism where they can come together and pool their funds and help each other, they will be able to get access without requiring third-party help. So that's what we're really communicating.
I really like the part about not requiring third-party help, because sometimes when we get stories here at Idea TV, some people complain that, oh, they keep hearing there's funding, but access to that funding is the problem. And so I like that Susumi is going to fix that. But you are at the intersection of fintech and cybersecurity. Isn't that a lot for you to handle?
Well, they are quite complementary.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about trust and protection. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in one sense, fintech is able to improve efficiency, having systems that cut away the red tape so that people can get to what they want to do. But then you also need those systems to be protected. Sure. So that's where cybersecurity comes in. And my engagement with cybersecurity was out of, we understood a couple of years, 3 years ago, when we were setting up Susumi, that it was critical to secure our systems, you know. And then we looked across a number of systems that were out there and what the dependencies were before we were able to get in touch with the guy who developed the algorithm for Abatis, okay, the Abatis system, which, you know, really suits what we want, because in this case, Abatis is an immutable system, just like in blockchain as well. So it completely locks down your operating system. It works from the kernel, so you don't have any issues of malware at all. So it's about protection of those systems, and then the systems that give you improve your efficiency in what you do. So it's quite complementary, two sides of the same coin, if you would say.
Two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure a lot of people are already building trust for Susumi, and that's commendable. But for viewers who are just hearing about Susumi for the first time, maybe you should break it down. What exactly does Susumi do? Explain it to the barest minimum.
So Susumi is what we call decentralized crowdfunding. Okay, based on a susu, which is an age-old traditional model. Okay, so first of all, what is crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is something that everybody is already used to. It's a group of people coming together, maybe you want to donate money if somebody's relation died and you want to do a bereavement fund, that's crowdfunding. You want to build a school in your community, people donate money, that's crowdfunding. So it's something people have always done every day. The people are used to it, either on WhatsApp groups or in the church hall or wherever. Now, Isusu, like I said earlier, is also something that we are already used to. So we take elements of these two and bring it together. And why we call it decentralized is that we now create an algorithm. So on Susumi, there are rules. On the blockchain, you have something called the smart contract. So we put rules that determine. So for example, you have 10 people, as in the normal Isusu system, and they are all contributing 100 naira, together so that they can give one person 1,000 naira. So this is all well and good, they can do this. But with Susumi, what we have done is that we put the rules that govern that arrangement on the blockchain so that it cannot be changed. You can be sure that when you contribute your 100 naira and it gets up to 1,000 naira, it goes to the person who is the beneficiary for it. And then we also use cryptocurrency, which rewards the giver. So, for example, you give 100 naira into the group. Now, when the guy gets his 1,000 naira and solves his problem, all those who gave 100 naira receive a token, that is a Susu token, worth 100 naira. So what that Susu token does is acts as a kind of a digital receipt or a digital ticket, and it says it's evidence to say that you have contributed 100 naira to this person. Okay, so that when it is your turn and you want others to contribute to you, you can now deposit your token, and then other people can also contribute to you. So that way, that's why we call it you give and then you get. That's our slogan. You give, you get, plus more. So everybody who gives gets more in return. Okay.
And anybody can access this. Are there like certain requirements to get on the Susumi?
Well, Susumi is, we are registered and approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay. So we have our compliance terms, compliance criteria, but basically there's no restriction. That's the whole idea. The whole idea is to break down the barriers to access. So we don't have restrictions, but then we have the basic KYC. We want to know who you are and how you can be identified. And apart from that, there is no restriction. Anybody can have access.
How about age restriction?
There is age restrictions, of course. So this is all part of the compliance in our KYC. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So speaking as an entrepreneur, what are the lessons that you've built some companies so far?
Well, I mean, we have the usual. I've encountered the usual challenges that we have in Nigeria. Of course, like you mentioned, access to capital, weak institutional systems, bureaucracy, bottlenecks. But at the same time, I find that in the course of my time, I see that the talent is rising here in Africa. I see the opportunities have been growing. I see also that in Africa, most importantly, where we have all these problems, it means there are even more opportunities to be solved. And then, of course, there is the resilience, particularly in Nigeria, and the way our people, like I normally say, when you look around, especially with regards to technology, it's like the whole country are all coders. When you get your DSTV or whatever, just let the people know what to do, and they know the star 1 2 3 4 star hash, and they do. Everybody knows how to do that. So that's a fantastic thing. So I find it's incredible that looking at what we have been doing and what we're seeing all around us, the culture of innovation that is growing every day. I think the Nigerian experience has been quite dynamic, quite interesting. Yeah.
All right. I think we have to pause for now and go on a short break. We'll still be talking with Mazi Igwe after this break. Stay with us.
Having had that knowledge, having seen the importance there.
We were in enough numbers.
We're just trying to use technology to make something that we're already aware of more efficient and do a little bit further to help us.
For clans, particular clans of interest.
Welcome back to Ideas Special Feature, and today our special guest has been Mazi Igwe. And he's been talking to us a lot about cybersecurity, fintech, and all that he's been doing in that space. So we continued the conversation, and he was just telling us before that break about some of the bottlenecks and challenges he's had to, deal with, and of course the wins as an entrepreneur building in Africa. But I want to ask you about the young people. When you spoke, you mentioned that you've noticed the kind of talents that we have. What excites you about the next generation of African young people? Should we be worried, or is there an excitement in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt, there is excitement. I mean, the one thing about the younger generation, this generation of young people, which that marvels me, is the energy.
Okay.
There's a whole lot more energy. When I was much younger, I think we were a little bit more laid back, contemplative. Perhaps because there were reins and restrictions were a lot more. But now you see the energy that is exploding. People are defining themselves. People are breaking across new frontiers, new barriers, going into places that you didn't think a young person would do, with a lot of confidence as well. So I'm very excited, and we get the statistics telling us that a huge majority of the population is below the age of 30 in Nigeria. So the future can only be very, very exciting for Nigeria. And we used to say in the past, giant of Africa, well, I think we're about to begin to see that giant waking up right now.
Okay. Because I know there are people who are already saying, are you sure Nigeria is still the giant? But I mean, when you see the strength of the young people in Nigeria and of course other African countries, you can just tell that the future is not bleak, it's really bright.
Yeah.
But I want you to speak to innovation in Africa. Where are we? Are we doing well compared to our counterparts? Are we really doing well?
Well, innovation to me it's more about doing something that something that personally, something that we already know, but doing it in a way with the tools that are available to you, in a way that meets a specific need. So innovation is not really for the sake of innovation. I don't see innovation as being aping or copying what is being done in some places, and that becomes innovation. No, it has to be relevant. And you find that whenever technology or a system or a pattern is used for something that there is a need for it in the society, in Africa we adopt that technology, we adopt that system faster than anywhere else in the world, but it has to fulfill a need. So I see innovation not just in terms of creating something for the fun of it, but where there is a need, where it applies directly to some kind of problem, solves a problem. I mean, in our time we looked at satellites, which solved problems of communication from remote places, and then you talk about mobile and GSM in terms of entertainment, so that the phones weren't boring. And now we're talking about blockchain, and blockchain itself, it's a whole wild new horizon really, where you can have so many different areas of innovation. Okay, and I see people now looking, and I would say, I love what you guys are doing here, and I would say the thing is for innovators out there to look at actually working with the people as opposed to purely the technology. What it is that solves the core needs of the people, and then put the technology there. People might say, okay, this technology is complicated, but when that need is being solved, they would grasp onto the technology. The important thing is how does the innovation deal with what the people need, really.
Okay, I like that you mentioned this, because just yesterday we were having a conversation and I was telling somebody, it feels as though the only problem that a lot of people in the tech space are trying to solve for Africa is mainly in the fintech world. Why is it so? Is that the problem that is glaring? Is that the only problem that we really have? Why are people not looking towards other things? Why are we not looking towards agriculture? And I'm saying because I see how fintech has grown over time. with how things are now simplified. I do not want to call names, but we see how even marketmen, with what Susumi is doing, crowdfunding, and there are other people who are trying to solve that same problem. So why are we not expanding into other areas? And let me tell you what the person said. The person said that investors are really interested in fintech more. So you could say yes or no to that.
Well, that's a very important point that you've touched upon. So one of the philosophies behind Susumi is that we understand that this issue of access to capital is a lot deeper than most people understand. You see, lack of access to capital is actually the primary reason, in my view, of why we are underdeveloped, or where we are, or we can say we are not wealthy, unlike compared to other nations, because you don't have access to capital. When you depend on external parties, when you depend on so-called investors or international aid or so to help you to invest, they can only invest in things that are their own priority, not your own priority. Okay, so a typical example I normally give is if you wanted to build in your place maybe a research center to research into traditional herbs that can cure diseases that plague your own particular part of the world, in that your community, but you needed funding for that research center. You may not get it because the investors don't see it scaling into where their own priority is. However, those same investors will be willing to give you money to build a microwave plant in that community. Whereas in the communities, there's probably nobody there who uses the microwave. So it's not their priority. So when we are looking at external parties to finance or fund us, it's always going to be their priority. So that's by the way. But in terms of fintech, yes, there is a lot of proliferation of fintech that's going on, gets the news and all that. But at the same time, even the foundation for fintech is quite lacking here. But we can see in not just in technology-based innovation, but innovation in way things are done. Okay, in way things are, and systems that are being established. So whilst we were going through the process with the Securities and Exchange Commission, they talked to us about these models of building roads using some new financial system that came out, which is quite interesting, which is giving private people access to public infrastructure. So the way that itself is being structured is innovation. So there's innovation in policy, and you see a lot of that in the government, certain things that they do. In agriculture, the other day I was watching over the weekend a television program about this company that was doing, various types of agricultural things, planting without soil and things like that, and planting in bags and things that you can produce or grow in your house at large scale. And so there is innovation, but you may not see it that much. And then it brings us back to the question of scale, which we need to now look at, because you want to scale beyond the subsistence. Okay, you want to scale still beyond just doing things that can just get you by. Okay, you want to be able to do things that can transform how even society operates, and you need capital for it. So it brings us back to the same question again. Capital.
What can we do in Africa for this capital, from your point of view?
Well, from my point of view, the capital is there. Okay.
We're just not tapping.
So you say a lot of times, one, we have the talent, we have the resources. That's no doubt about. The only thing is, how do we structure it? How is it organized? So we find that, for example, you may have heard where they talk about foreign direct investment. Okay, on the money that comes in from investors and international aid. It's not up to 1/3 of the money that goes out of Africa in debt repayment. So the money that comes in is not up to 1/3 the amount that goes out in payment, which is, we already have the money and we're asking for this money to come in. So we need to now look at how we can increase access to this money that goes out of Africa all the time, so that it can now be used to develop Africa. Because if it is used to develop Africa, we will still have enough to pay back whatever that we're paying back, but then develop at our own pace for our own priorities. So that is the way I see it. So the issue of access to capital is primary, and it's not a question of from a top-down solution. We also have to look at the bottom-up approaches.
Okay, let's go back to Susumi.
Yes, please.
What durable impact are you envisage once Susumi is launched?
So Susumi really comes into the heart of the conversation in terms of how it can help us use capital that is latent, okay, capital that is just available within our community, and channel it into things. So in Susumi, we have three basic types of funds. So we have the basic Susu fund. So the basic Susu fund is for individuals. It's just like a GoFundMe kind of thing, but with a Susu model. Okay, so that's, you want to raise money. You're going to hospital or you're traveling and you want to buy a ticket, and that kind of money. You can use a basic Susu fund to fund that. Then we have the enterprise Susu fund. So an enterprise Susu fund is targeted at those kind of people, like, there's the woman who's making plantain chips and to send her kids to school in her back garden, and her plantain chips are quite good. But the thing is that she doesn't have money to scale up this operation, to buy the fryer and all those. The bank is not going to give her 20 million naira. Who is she going to ask that's going to give her 20 million naira to fry her plantain chips? She doesn't have any collateral. She does not qualify. So she's just stuck in that rut. So with an enterprise Susu fund, she's able to now come on the platform and raise that money from people who are participating within the Susu community. Okay? So that is one area where we look at empowering small-scale entrepreneurs, MSMEs. Then going further, we now talk about what we call the Community Susu Fund. So Community Susu Fund deals with things that relate to infrastructure, community infrastructure. You want to build a town hall, you want to build a school in the village, you want to, all those things that people want to do in their communities, where they tell everybody in the maybe village union and things like that to come and contribute, and they contribute and they contribute, and sometimes it's never enough. So Susumi is structured to help use algorithms. So we look at Susumi as a transformative technology. We look at it as a revolution in crowdfunding. Okay, we remember that crowdfunding isn't a loan, it isn't an investment per se. It's basically, you raise the money and the project is done.
Okay. Thank you for breaking it down.
Yes.
I can't wait to get on Susumi, by the way.
Very welcome. It's at susumi.io. You can always go there and whitelist. We'll soon be launching.
Okay. Great. So I wanted to speak about Idea TV, being the first innovation TV in Africa. What message do you have for us? I know you've already said that you love what we are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
More emphasis.
Idea TV, I believe it's an acronym of some sort. What is the acronym?
So it's simply Innovation, Development and Entrepreneurship in Africa.
Oh, that is fantastic. I love Idea TV because it now gives a platform to, our people, especially the young people, to see themselves, hear about what others are doing, across, I don't know, the broadcast networks or social media. And you see, there is an impact. I'll tell you something about innovation in this part of the world, especially in Nigeria. If you look, for example, in the media or literary sector, many years ago, maybe in the 60s and the early 70s, there was a barrier to publishing. Publishing wasn't really very easy. But then you had this thing they call the Onisha market literature, okay? It's just some kind of novels that were just being published in back houses and thrown onto the street, and people were gobbling it up, filling that void, okay? That was innovation, but it was happening silently. Then 10, 15 years later, you see that same philosophy of that Onisha market literature gets brought into what we call Nollywood. Okay, and then you're having films coming up everywhere. And then 10, 15 years later, we are now in the whole content environment that people coming up with. So, that energy, that innovation, that ethos is already a part of us. So when you have a platform like Idea TV, I think it's very important. It's fantastic. It gives people that encouragement, makes people to know that, coming up, actually, even if it's talking about your idea or showcasing your idea, it's actually really cool. and very inspirational. So I give all credit to you guys, and I know the sky is your limit, really.
It's our starting point.
No, it's actually your starting point.
Thank you so much. How do we connect for more information?
Well, Susumi is on the web app, and that is susumi.io, susumi.io. So if you go there, all the information is there, our white paper is there, and you can whitelist to get ready for the launch, which we hope by the end of this festive season in the market. Yeah.
I'll be whitelisted, so I hope you do too. So before we let you go, it was so good to have you.
Yes,
but what are your final words, especially to young people who are looking to come into this space?
When you mean this space, you mean the innovation space?
The innovation space, the tech space, the cybersecurity space.
Well, first of all, innovation is not very easy, and so most people who have maybe read about the great inventors and people like that, you can see what their journeys have been like. You know, there's this thing they talk about, the 10,000 step thing. You know, everybody, you need 10,000 attempts to actually get it right. So you need resilience and faith. Your faith is very important. You know, so I think it is important not to get discouraged. You know, there are a lot of things that work against you, especially in this part of the world. But you have to keep it up. And secondly, don't overestimate how difficult it is to actually do these things. Sometimes people say, oh, by the time I do that and I do that. No, we don't underestimate, especially in Nigeria. People really overestimate how difficult it is, you know, to do business, to develop things, to work. So we shouldn't do that. And on the other hand, also, do not underestimate the quality of the help that is out there, the talent, the support systems. You know, we have many mentors available, especially for young people who are willing and looking for people who just have the zeal or the passion for what they believe in. So those are the things I would like to say. You know, have faith, have that confidence, and don't look and think it's too tough, because really once you start, it's not really too tough, but you have to have resilience.
Once you start, it's never too tough. You just have to have resilience, and that's what I'm taking away from this conversation with Mazi Sam Igwe. It was so good to have you once more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for honoring my invitation.
Thank you, Choma.
There you heard it. Do well to send your thoughts. If you have any questions for Mazi, comment on this video and we'll share with him, and you'll be sure to get a feedback from him, right?
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Having had that knowledge, having seen the importance there.
enough numbers.
We're just trying to use technology to make something that we're already aware of more efficient and do it to be further help us.
Or plants, particular plants of interest.
Value